Everybody pretty much there? Okay. 2 Samuel chapter 12. The Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, "There are two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, it drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, 'As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this deserves to die. He must pay for the lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity.' Then Nathan said to David, 'You are the man. That is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if all this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with a sword and took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now therefore the sword will never depart from your house, because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. This is what the Lord says, out of your own household I am going to bring calamity upon you. Before your very eyes I will take your wives and give them to one who is close to you, and he will lie with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel." Then David said to Nathan, "I have sinned against the Lord." Nathan replied, "The Lord has taken away your sin. You are not going to die, but because by doing this you have made the enemies of the Lord show utter contempt, the son born to you will die." After Nathan had gone home, the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife had borne to David, and he became ill. David pleaded with God for the child. He fasted, went into his house, and spent the nights lying on the ground. The elders of his household stood beside him to get him up from the ground, but he refused, and he would not eat any food with them. On the 7th day the child died. David's servants were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they thought, "While the child was still alive, we spoke to David, but he would not listen to us. How can we tell him the child is dead? He may do something desperate." David noticed that his servants were whispering among themselves, and he realized the child was dead. "Is the child dead?" he asked. "Yes," they replied, "he is dead." Then David got up from the ground. After he had washed, put on lotions, and changed his clothes, he went to the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then he went to his own house, and at his request they served him food, and he ate. The servants asked him, "Why are you acting this way? While the child was alive you fasted and wept, but now that the child is dead you get up and eat?" He answered, "While the child was still alive I fasted and wept. I thought, who knows? The Lord may be gracious to me and let the child live. But now that he is dead, why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me." Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and she went to her and lay with her. She gave birth to a son, and they named him Solomon. The Lord loved him, and because the Lord loved him, he sent word through Nathan the prophet to name him Jedediah. Meanwhile, Joab fought against Rabbah of the Ammonites and captured the royal citadel. Joab then sent messengers to David, saying, "I have fought against Rabbah and taken his water supply. Now muster the rest of the troops and besiege the city and capture it. Otherwise I will take the city, and it will be named after me." So David mustered an entire army and went up, and went headed to the king. Its weight and talents of gold he took the crown, and it was set with precious stones. It was placed on David's head. He took a great quantity of plunder from the city, and brought out the people who were there, consigning them to labor with saws, with iron picks and axes, and he made them work at brickmaking. He did this to all the Ammonite towns. Then David and his entire army returned to Jerusalem. That is the result of a very popular story with David and Bathsheba. Before we get into anything with the sermon, I'm going to start with a clip. And this clip is going to communicate some of the things that I'm going to be talking about. And the clip is labeled Monkey Business. You'll find out why. Yes, it's Seinfeld. So just pay attention to the clip and look at everything that's going on. Kyle's going to grab the light so you can see it more clearly. We're going to play a couple sections at a time. I'm going to explain why I used this for the chapters that I chose for today's sermon. John, go ahead with the clip. Want to turn up the volume, please? Alright, just you restart the clip there. Let me preface this a little bit more, since we're having technical difficulties. Who can tell me why David had this issue with the child that Bathsheba bore? What was the deal? Why did all this calamity come? Why did God say, I'm going to put the sword against your house? I am going to lay a stumbling block before you and your family and your progeny because of what you did. What did he do?
He took someone's wife, right?
He took someone's wife, but that's not the worst part. See, that's not the biggest deal. That's right. See, David made a mistake, okay? He made a big mistake. The problem is, as we saw, once he repented, God forgave him. When he was truly repentant, truly sorry for what he did, when he realized it, and it was 2 years later, mind you, at least. If he would have just went to Uriah and said, Uriah, I saw your wife on the roof. I made a mistake. We made a mistake. It was dumb. It was stupid. And we didn't have self-control. It would have been better. But David didn't want the news to get out because Bathsheba came and said, well, David, I'm pregnant. And Uriah was out at war. So Uriah was not the father. And they would know that. So instead of just telling Uriah, David hatched this plot. Let's give Uriah a leave so that he'll return home and that we can cover this up. Well, in the chapter previous to what I read, Uriah comes back to the kingdom. And he's outside the city walls. He says, why should I go home when my fellow troops are sleeping out in the field, in the war? He said, I will sleep at this gate as I take my rest. I will not return home. And so David tried again. He tried to get him drunk so that he would go home. And then he could cover this all up. Uriah decided again, I'm going to sleep outside this gate. And so David, desperate to cover this up, instead of recognizing his mistake, fixing it, asking for forgiveness, he told Joab to send Uriah to the front lines against an enemy stronghold that he knew they were not going to be able to take. He said, put him out front so that he will get stricken down, so that nobody would find out what David did. And then when Uriah was dead, David took his wife as his own. And as you see, 2 years, he did nothing about it. And you saw the story at the beginning. Raving mad. This guy did what? And Nathan came and told him, that was you that did that. And it's all about forgiveness. This clip is all about forgiveness, and you're going to see why. Is it all set? Okay, go ahead. Can you guys hear it? Yeah. How about you use my mic there? You want to pause it? You guys, while we're waiting, turn to 2 Samuel 13. That's going to be our next stop. And we're going to go right in. Because one of the things that we see with David, although he's the man after God's own heart, he tends to make a lot of mistakes. He tends to do some things wrong.